Hi, I'm Penny Angus. I am a culture journalist, an essayist, filmmaker, and I am the creative consultant slash researcher for Lasting Support. I am thrilled to introduce our new series where we'll be shedding the light on the important work we do here at Lasting Support. Whether you're a care experienced individual, a young person in care, a policymaker, or a professional in the sector, this series is designed specifically for you. We invite you to join us on this journey as we share stories, experiences, and initiatives aimed at making a lasting impact. If you want to know more about Lasting Support, please do visit the website below and make sure you follow us on our social media. Hi, I'm Penny Angus. I am the social media manager and creative consultant and researcher for Lasting Support Services. And I'm here today with Faysal. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Faisal. So I work as one of the project deliverers for Lasting Support Service, particularly online services, but I also do the radicalization training. I do the admin with the finance, and I'm also one of the Prevent community advisors for Ealing. So I get around a little bit, but my big thing is the project delivery.
How did you get into Lasting Support Service?
So as far as the time frame is concerned, it would have been July 2000. No, yeah, 2022. So I just graduated from financial economics down at Kingston, and
Hmm.
I was looking around and I was trying to figure out what graduate programs I wanted to do and stuff, and ended up coming across Lasting Support Service wanting a youth-led project to be done. It was delivering a training in a local school down in Acton, and it caught my eye because it stood out across all the other graduate programs, and they're talking 40 hours a week, full time, bank, or clerical or stuff like that. It just seemed like a fun project, and it seemed like a nice way to kind of do something for the community, because that isn't really something that you're going to be doing on most graduate schemes for economics. It's very much kind of more of a business environment. So I took a chance at it. I enjoyed my time there, and I kind of just stuck around from that point because, like I said, kind of the giving back aspect was pretty fun, and it was a fairly chill environment to be around in terms of how I could act. I was given quite a lot of freedom in how I actually delivered the project, which was quite cool because I wasn't really expecting that. And I had a blast, honestly.
I think it's similar to me. So like I was working originally with our founder's sister. I did some talks at her school and she put me in touch with her. And then Warda asked me to do a presentation in Portsmouth, a virtual one. And the same thing, I was like, oh, this is so much like more freeing and more interesting than the work I was actually doing in my like 9 to 5. And I think the more I did it, I was kind of like, okay, like I can give back and I can help people, but like it's also very interesting work. And it's like the other time, a few months ago, we did a presentation, both of us, where you were talking about like online radicalization and online
Yeah.
safety. And then on my side, I was talking about, social media and body image. And I think things like that are so interesting because we're giving such different talks, but they also are related in the sense that young people go through all of that.
Yeah, probably the biggest thing that's kind of, I'm not, I wouldn't say keeping me here, because there are other reasons that are keeping me here, but I get to meet a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life, and it's really interesting to kind of engage with them and stuff like that. Just last week I was at a change project, so it was like an open forum talking about change in London, and just the kind of people I met a kind of a self-help mentor. I've got his book right next to me. I met or different organizations doing a lot of different things in London, because I wouldn't do so otherwise. I don't think I would have ever met any of these people working kind of another industry. And as far as project delivery is concerned, I mean, initially I was like, oh, dealing with kids, this is going to be really new for me, but it did come somewhat quite naturally.
Yeah.
Just kind of giving them the basics and stuff. And then on the flip side, having to work with adults, especially older ones, I've got this nice like duality of I have to
Hmm.
cover the basics with the young ones and I have to cover the basics with the old ones. But it is really fulfilling and it's a lot of fun. And I found as well that, you know what, it keeps me active as far as like traveling around London and such, I,
Yeah.
compared to, like you said, the office job where, it's very straightforward, it's very simple, it's very kind of narrow, but, with this, I'm doing something different pretty much every day. And fortunately, on one hand, I get to do my boring admin stuff, which, it makes me happy because I get to organize stuff and I get to make things neat and clean and stuff. And on the other hand, I'm able to kind of go to these events, go to these deliveries, meet a lot of new people, feel like I'm actually having an impact and see that impact in person because I get to, I get to face to face with the people that we work with. And, whether it was the schools, whether it was the virtual trainings that we've been doing, or whether it was the face to face events that we've been doing around central London, it's just been a lot of fun kind of getting around and trying to figure out, on the fly how we can improve things, but also just the fact that we have to improvise quite a lot of the time, and just figure out how we can make things even better just on the day. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, 100%. And I think for me, the first time I did one of those talks, I was so nervous because I was just like, what if I say something wrong? Or what if they like don't respect me? Because again, at the time I was 23, so I was just like, I'm not that much older than them. But I think you kind of like come to learn that kids are actually like very nice and they do listen to you. Not all the time, but I think most of the time they are like really interested in what you have to say to them. And they come to you with like their differing opinions or like maybe not understanding, and it's really fulfilling to kind of be able to have that connection. And I think for me the way I kind of try to make mine engaging is to kind of intersperse it with maybe like photos or videos like from TikTok and stuff, and then to do tasks. And I think like if you would have asked me when I was 15 that would this be something I'd be interested in, I would say no, but then doing it now I'm like, oh, this is actually really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I have fun training people. I didn't expect it to be this kind of training. I've
Mm.
done little bits of, kind of things here and there with getting people up to date with things. But as far as the young ones are concerned, yeah, no, I thought I was gonna get bullied. Like,
Yeah, I thought I was gonna get really
yeah, but then I kind of realized that what the trainings turned into was it turned into kind of a game for me of how can I catch that attention? Because when I did the training in Acton, for example, some people were kind of here with kind of the online safety stuff, and some people were kind of here with like the law side and like the statutory rights and such for online service. And then I would kind of throw out, do you know how much data Snapchat has on you? Have you ever requested your Google data profile? And then
Mm.
instantly like that, the ones that weren't really paying attention would like kind of sit up and they'd look at me. They'd be like, "What do you mean request my data from Snapchat?" I'm like, "Have you ever done it?" And they're like, "No." And I'm just like straight from there, and just kind of seeing how people react to different bits of information is quite a lot of fun. It's been great, and the feedback we've gotten has been sensational so far with regards to what we've delivered.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I did one a couple months back, I remember the adults being like, oh, I didn't know this. And I was like, oh, wow. Like I'm teaching
Yeah.
things to people. So interesting. I guess kind of, what do you think are kind of like the biggest challenges that young people are facing at the moment?
Oh, lifestyle. The one thing I've noticed, and this kind of came, I was having a discussion with an imam from West Ealing Mosque, and we had a chat, and he asked me, what do you think about the youth and stuff these days? And I kind of just took a hot second and just went, they don't know really how to live yet. As an adult, you kind of start figuring out usually around 18 what a complete life is, because you go to uni in most cases and then you're like, oh, I have to cook, I have to do laundry, I have to keep myself entertained and keep myself busy and stuff like that. A lot of young kids don't have that guidance. And I remember being in school and the big question was, how do I do taxes? We never got the answer for that, but it's kind of gotten worse from that point, because like
Mhm.
with my schedule today, I'm thinking, okay, how do I structure my food? How do I structure my travel? How do I structure my entertainment? How do I structure, this? I've come to kind of build my life. And a lot of kids, that's the answer that they want, and they're never going to get that answer. And the
Yeah.
biggest like consequence of that is you see a lot of kids kind of just aimless about what to do after school. And I'm not even talking like post school, post 16. As soon as it hits 4:30, they don't know what they're going to be doing with their day. They
Hmm.
don't know what they can engage with. After school clubs is by far the easiest things, but a lot of kids don't fit into that space.
Yeah.
So in quite a lot of cases, you're either going to get kids who are going to come home and they're not going to enrich themselves and they're going to kind of not really know what to do. And then on the other hand, you're going to have, the stereotypical kids out late, kind of roaming
Hmm.
the streets and such. So for me, I think the biggest thing is just figuring out ways to enrich them. What services can we provide them? What activities can we provide them? Because within sixth form at least, they hammer into us. You have to be an interesting candidate. You have to be an interesting person. But it goes beyond that, because yes, from an employment standpoint, you have to be interesting. But even
Yeah.
just from a perspective, like a lot of kids just don't know how to engage themselves, and we talk about living a healthy life, but it's also about happiness as well. with regards to this stuff, because we've seen with some of the projects we've delivered, even something as simple as just weekly MMA, you see a big change in these kids and how they start responding, because it's the little things that kind of have the biggest impact.
Yeah.
Even something just as simple as teaching these kids, okay, well, here's how you make a breakfast, because some of these kids, they don't know how to necessarily do something as simple as that. And it's not because they're completely incapable, it's because they haven't really been coached through the alternatives. A really good example is, you know like I said, kind of with the sports classes and stuff, a lot of kids know how to expend energy, they know how to keep themselves busy and stuff within those MMA classes. But then you explain to them, okay, well, what are you going to do after the MMA class? And they're like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, you're serious about MMA? And they're like, yeah, I'm really interested in MMA. And I'm like, have you thought about the gym? Have you thought about eating before you come to MMA? Have you thought about what you can be doing in school potentially to give you more time to do MMA? The best way that I can explain it is kids on how to frame their lives, because if you have a goal, you know how to orient it. If you're really into football, you're going to start forming your life around football. You're going to start doing a lot
Yeah.
of things differently. And it serves as a really good, like, I'd say, base point for them, because school is the default for a lot of people. But as soon as school ends, they don't know what to do, because what can you do to base your life around school? It's wake up on time, it's revise after school. That's pretty much
Yeah.
it. So for me, it's been kind of this coaching and mentoring aspect. And I think I've grown because of it. They say that you live vicariously through the people that you work with, and I do, because there's times where I'll be anticipating things more than they'll be. I'll be waiting to hear about something happening in their lives, and they'll tell me, and I'll be like, oh, that's fantastic. And they'll be kind of a bit more reserved than I am, but it's biggest focus at the moment, honestly.
Yeah, because you're 100% right. I think obviously youth clubs have been cut to the bones. They don't really exist anymore. And any kind of services, any kind of activities are really expensive. And so kids don't want to ask for their parents' money, or if they're in the care, it's really hard to get funding for that. And so it's important that they find something else that's just not education, because at the end of the day, not everybody responds to education. That's not their goal. That's not how they can go about life. And even if they are into education, maybe they learn differently than just sitting down, revising, looking at a book.
Yeah.
I was that way in uni. Like, I couldn't just sit down and revise. Like, I'd have to go out and walk and do stuff. And that's how like my brain started to actually function. So I definitely think like we need to kind of, as a society, find more ways for children and young people to kind of build their lives around things they genuinely enjoy.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is literacy as well. Like I said, as an adult, we tend to understand these concepts. We tend to get the language, but a lot of kids, they're not literate with these kind of things. You ask them, okay, well, when you go to university first year, what is your life actually going to be like? And most of them just kind of, not necessarily shrug, but they have the understanding of, they'll get through it eventually, when we could have so much of a better setup system involved. I pray for the kids at uni, ramen first year in their accommodation, that lifestyle. But yeah, for me, it's just literacy. It's because we do employability sessions and a lot of stuff like that. But I've kind of found that when you leave uni, it's a whole different landscape when it comes to those early employability sessions. Because I think when you're the UCAS process, or when you're going through, just even like your second or third year in university, when you might have a sandwich, maybe you just want to take a gap year quickly, the sessions don't cover that kind of information. So you get people kind of at the end of employability where they just don't know what they're going to be doing with it. With kids and stuff, we have to build them as strong as we can, as humanly possible. And I think exploring different ways of educating that is very important, because like you said, a lot of kids don't necessarily respond to that school environment, that sit in a classroom full of 30 people and be lectured to kind of perspective. Especially when you go to post 18 and suddenly you're given all of this freedom, you need to be able to build your own schedule, because university isn't going to do that for you. I was there, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, sometimes 2 to 3 hours. So I would have all this free time, and I'd have to figure out, what am I going to do with it? Am I going to go revise? Am I going to go stay there? Or am I going to go enrich myself? And that's been my focus with the kids now, because honestly, it's having the biggest effect that I'm seeing at the moment. We talk about kids in the care system. We talk about kids, who don't necessarily have many role models to them physically in person, because not all teachers can necessarily be that for them, and I understand it. But we do need a bigger coaching infrastructure, in my opinion, a lot more mentorship. And the most surprising thing that I've seen is that a lot of young people are willing to do that for themselves. when we start looking at volunteers for some of the project deliveries, there's always a short list. Honestly, there's always kids who are asking about what they can engage with, and it's
Mm.
from all different walks of life. Just recently we had two people reach out about taking a creative program that they had from their university and applying that to one of the local community centers that we had here. And I was very surprised with that because I was like, really, like you wanna run the same program? And they were like, yeah, we'd be happy to do it. And then all of a sudden we had a potential project on our hands because right next door there was a sports hall with like a massive projector and a full like audio visual system, the kind where you could make your own films and show them to a whole group of people. And I was
Mm.
like, oh, now we have a reason to use that, I guess, because just up until that point it wasn't available. And you have all these kids who want to do sports coaching, all these kids who want to even just do like gaming sessions. I mean, there are kids who want to grow up and they want to do FIFA tournaments for their free time. And it's been surprising to me because I expected it a little bit, but I didn't expect it at this scale. Is people are kind of just getting up and starting and getting ready to kind of do things the way that they want to. So it's been phenomenal to see that.
What we thought of as a career, like as kids, you kind of learn fireman, nurse, doctor, and then maybe you become a teacher. And I think like obviously because of the internet, that's expanded so much. And so like it is very easy to become a content creator or become a streamer or a writer and whatever you want to do. And so that happens and the kids find out about it, but then there's like no way that they can learn those skills or learn how to apply them to their everyday lives. And so doing stuff like that, like getting film classes or writing workshops or things that can kind of hone their craft need to exist. And I think it's phenomenal that we get to do that. And then I guess on the other side, we kind of also have to make sure that they are aware of the internet and, the downsides and how to protect themselves. So, if at one side you can use the internet in a good way to hone your craft, on the other side, you have to be careful because data safety is really important and to make sure you're protecting yourself.
Yeah, like people's online usage has changed rapidly. When it comes to information, I mean, it just comes down to equipping people to be able to kind of question things themselves and decipher information on their own accord. Because you know as long as everybody has an opinion and everybody has information, you're always going to have something be wrong, and it's okay to be wrong. But we have to be able to distinguish that. People's identities are becoming more and more and more and more sophisticated and more developed, but we do need conversations about it because, like you said, when it comes to one-to-one coaching with regards to online usage, what realistically is your life going to pan out to be, because with a lot of people today, using social media 24/7, effectively blogging and vlogging everything that they do without using the word vlog, because I feel like that has a stigma to it, but they are vlogging their entire lives. It's having an honest conversation of what about next year? You know, is this realistically what you're going to be doing as you not only just enter employment, but even as you structure your life around? Because social media is its own craze, and it's honestly self-feeding at this point. But people need coaching for it, honestly, because we're getting to this stage where it is overtaking people's lives, and it is getting to that stage where the real world consequences of it are becoming more and more apparent in regards to like view time, with regards to the kind of content that people are seeing. When I do, because I do radicalization training as well, or I'm part of the radicalization training that we do here. And I tend to talk about the online usage of things and such and how people are doing. And we have to warn people of that, because I think in my age it was Live Leak, right? Was the place to get things. And now
Yeah.
it's TikTok. Now you can see all kinds of crazy stuff on TikTok or Telegram and stuff like that. It's probably not a great idea to be viewing that or having stuff like that. And even Reddit. Honestly, Reddit has been the biggest one recently, because now you just have entire subreddits dedicated to explicit material
Well,
and
it
stuff
used to
like that.
be like 4chan and 8chan, and then it's
Yeah.
slowly just drifted down to like Reddit and then TikTok.
Now it's like I'll go on Reddit and I'll be like, why is this on my? Why am I looking?
Mhm.
Or be on TikTok, I'm like, why am I looking at this? Like, nothing's like a barrier to entry anymore. People can just hop in and hop out as they see fit out of social media, and so now we're seeing a lot of different things clashing,
Yeah.
with regards to kind of how people can conduct themselves online. And I definitely think we moved past the point of social media is going to like drop kick your employability,
Mm.
because it's becoming so much of a common culture now. But honestly, the repercussions are still there. And like I said, with the one-to-one coaching, coaching kids and kind of how to better build their lives, because you can't be on social media 24/7. As much as that's becoming commercialized, it's not realistic. We still have a world to live in. So it's been kind of trying to approach that topic and such. It's interesting to see what how things are changing behaviorally, but also what new spaces are opening up. Because it was at an event, I think it was about a month ago, and someone was talking to me about online safety, and they brought up Discord, and I was like, and they were like, oh well, I've seen Discord kind of, or kind of go into the same spaces that Slack has been, which is they're both like kind of like group forum type apps. And she was like to me, Slack is very professional, and people are using it for teaching and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I mean, Discord tried that initiative, and their child safety warnings went up drastically to something like 40% of like their quarterly accounts banned and warned. It was just all child safety warnings. And there was a shock of that. And I was like, yeah, spaces are increasing and stuff, but we can't rely on moderation from that standpoint. We have to be defensive of it ourselves, because
Yeah.
people like to joke around that moderation is a thankless job, but you're never going to have enough moderation, honestly. People have to conduct themselves in a proper way first.
Yeah, 100%. And I think to your point of like, there's no boundaries anymore. I read this really interesting paper like a couple of months ago about how, like, back in the day, if you were to go on somewhere like a pro anorexia forum, like you'd go to it because you have that ailment and that's something you know about and it's your own club. In the same way, if you're an incel, you go to incel forums because you know that's what you want. But now, because everything is like blended together because of several different algorithms, you just find the content. It just comes on you. Like the amount of times I've just been like on my For You page, and I don't really tend to engage with insider content that much. But then I get something really just like bad. I'm like, why am I seeing this? What about me says I need to see this? But I guess they've kind of just pinpointed different things that you've watched, or maybe someone you follow that follows someone else, and now you're just viewing it. And it's obviously me being almost 25, I'm an adult, I can just be like, okay, I don't want to see this. But obviously, if you're a teenager or a kid and you're watching it, you're like, what is this? How do I find more? And then you just kind of fall into that little like rabbit hole. And so, like you said, there's moderation can exist, and like people are moderators, and even that has its own issue of like third party moderators in like South Asia who have to watch the worst content to like protect people. But I think at the end of the day, it really has to be you yourself. I can't watch this. This is why it's bad. And kids are not really taught about it because, unfortunately, in schools they are still behind the times. Like we are tripling our technological advances, our social advances, our cultural advances more than ever before.
I mean, like two of the big topics that I've kind of seen is body image, which you touch on, and you've done fantastic conversations on it. Body image is still a problem, and we don't really address it in school. We don't address it online as well. And then the other one was also financial literacy. So we've seen the rise of crypto. I thought we were done with it, but we're still here with pyramid schemes. We're still stuck in this loophole of pyramid schemes.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that I don't get spam called as often, but we're still in this age of pyramid schemes. And with regards to like body image and just general like conversations of dysmorphia and such, online you can find the spaces, but online, like you said, anybody can go into those spaces. Anybody can post anything. We need to catch up in terms of having conversations about a lot of personal problems and stuff, because yes, we can find the information online, but then also it's like you said, as an adult, we can choose what we pick, and we can choose what we see, and we can control our narrative in a sense. But a kid can't do that. A young kid emotionally can't do that. They don't know the language particularly. And with financial literacy, I've seen that a lot of the consequences are a lot more publicized. A lot of people are talking about, oh well, my child ruined me financially because they spent all their money on Ethereum, or look how I got rich on Bitcoin. You can do it the same way. But then we have all the other social issues that we don't get educated on. And online, I found some fantastic stuff and some fantastic conversations about stuff. And I've become a bit more positive because of what I've read online. But that was because I was able to sift through it all and figure out what I could actually take forward with me. Because as a young one, I was very into body image and stuff, and it was fitness. And I would go through different types of protein powders. I would go through different types of supplements and stuff like that. Or I try out different workout regimes and stuff. And it took me a while until I was mature enough to take a break from it all and then figure out content creators that I really, really did. And, I improved my health that way. But, if I just look at what's mainstream at the moment, and I look at, most importantly, what's on my For You page, honestly, with the young kids, it's getting them to a stage where not even just like the bare minimum of they can figure out ways of like checking information and stuff. I'm really glad that Twitter has their fact checker stuff for like political news and stuff, but people need to be able to do it on their own accord. But there's also like, can you actually have a discussion with this type of stuff? Because people will have different perspectives on everything. and being able to engage in that conversation is it's fantastic, and it's something that I think as a country needs to be done a lot more. There needs to be education on it, and we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing legislation being introduced. We had the big Hawaii like ban, like what was it in 2016? We're talking about in 2018 of like banning TikTok, of like putting like a freeze on certain apps and stuff like that. And I'm like, it's really cool that you want to pass legislation on TikTok, but like you could also just like try and incorporate them into existing education programs, because social media is never going to be taboo at this point. It's a door that can't be closed at the moment. We have to learn how to live with it. And if you're going to be going through passing legislation or kind of taking more of a conservative approach for, you know, I know there's been some discussion of like limiting people's like online usage objectively, which I've seen internationally. A couple countries have implemented that. It's not going to work. We have to go the education route. You can't just sit to a kid and say, well, you've got 3 hours of online usage, on Fridays. Good luck with it. They're just going to go look for the worst stuff. They're going to look for the stuff that like maximizes their time. Best example I can give for it is like if you give a kid £5 and you tell them what to do with the £5, they're going to try and get the best out of that £5 that they can. They're going to buy the biggest bags or like the biggest quantity of sweets for themselves and stuff. They're not going to try and feed themselves for the week. They're just going to go £5. I need to get the most out of this. It's the same thing with online usage. The more and more you restrict people, the more and more they're going to go straight for certain things, and that can often be the worst outcome. Because you see it with Reddit, for example. People go through rabbit holes on Reddit all the time, and it gets to the point where like they're on one subreddit pretty much the entire week. And if you like, you can't restrict people like that, because especially with the consideration that online usage is becoming just so important for just work. Even like you said with COVID, we're way too used to being online again at this point. You have to use it for work. You have to use it for organizing events and stuff like that. You have to RSVP to go shopping with a friend and stuff like that. Like we can't hide from it. But at the same time, I think in its current state, we can't really release it yet. It's just figuring out ways of kind of getting to that.
I think with social media, it's one of the things where you will never be able to outright ban it. It will exist. People will they'll use a VPN, they'll use something to kind of just get by. And so, but I think for some reason we have this like thing where we're like, let's just ban the thing that we don't understand straight away. It's like, that's just not going to work. No. And it's interesting to me that what they focus on is like TikTok versus like something that you should have a legislation about, like deepfakes, which is kind of interesting that you choose to focus on one or the other. Not that it's easy to pass that legislation, but like the fact that there is no focus on it.
I mean, like AI in general, honestly, it's becoming like, for example, like one of the biggest things that blew up in my mind recently was Drake. They've been recreating audio recently with him, and honestly, right? They absolutely slap, in my opinion. But like that was such a big discussion because Spotify took down the track immediately. It was the big one. It was
the ghost.
Heart on My Sleeve. Yeah, like they took it down like within like a month, and then now he's in a court case over it and everything, and it sparked a really big discussion of how far can we go with deepfakes? Because honestly, I think there should be legislation on deepfakes. The ability to harm people with it is insane, and we've already seen it so far. You've seen all these kind of cases of people with their faces plastered onto whatever, and they freak out about it, rightfully so, because it's insane. But then we also have the rise of AI voices, and particularly on YouTube, it's become a big thing, AI voices, and it's been fun because people have been like mimicking like movie voices or like video game protagonist voices from like 2004, and like they're saying all this wacky like modern stuff, and it's been like really weird to see my childhood like resurrected in that aspect. But there's points for it to be abused, and we've seen like ChatGPT going wild in like university forums with them saying that it's a form of cheating, and that they're using, implementing software to go against ChatGPT. And now we have the thing where ChatGPT is, if I remember correctly, it's going to have constant access to the internet now. If I remember the most recent post, ChatGPT, as far as I was aware, was updating itself on a schedule. I don't know if it was every week or every month, but like every often it would give itself new information. But now it's going to be constant, if it is what I remember reading. That's going to be a whole different kind of playing field and stuff. And I think we should pass legislation on stuff like that to an extent, because like what benefits does deepfake have to the private person? It really doesn't. And with regards to AI voices or ChatGPT and stuff like that, it's like you said, we are rapidly progressing as far as technology is concerned, but socially we haven't caught up with what we're developing yet. And it's coming to that standpoint of we we and realistically would we even need to do some of these things? Not necessarily. But that's kind of why I want to focus on the literacy with kids, because you know I can think of AI, chat gbt in regards to writing people's lifestyles is a concern. Deep faking people is going to have such a it's already had a massive impact on body dysmorphia, but as AI gets better, it's gonna get worse. I want to go back to the days where like CGI was like the limits of things, and like we watched Avatar in films, and that was insane. And now we're at this point where like um we're seeing phenomena like where I touched on earlier, like VTubers, but like you have people, content creators, streamers, their entire like construct is like a social 3D avatar, and they're getting more photorealistic, and
Yeah.
it's
There's
been
even
it's been a
models who are like that as well, like models who are completely virtual.
yeah, and like a lot of people don't really figure out is that like yes, quite a lot of this is honestly corporate. You know what I mean? Like the ability to create, because I remember like Japan had their virtual like pop stars for years
Those
now, like decades.
Haru,
Hatsune Miku, that kind of
yeah.
stuff. I feel like such a nerd right now talking about that. That was their thing, and then now we're having it. We're having all these corporate identities and stuff like that. With these like, we talk about industry plants, but like we are straight up getting industry plants at this point with virtual avatars and stuff like that. And socially, we're not caught up yet, and TikTok has so far been very resilient towards it. I have to be honest. TikTok as a community seems to be very adaptive, but like we don't talk about it in schools. We don't have open forums. It's a very awkward conversation to have with young kids, but I think one-to-one honestly works, because if when I catch these conversations and I have them and I'm talking about, well, yeah, did you know about this? All of a sudden, it's a very comfortable environment and stuff like that. Or even just having like small groups of kind of people and stuff, and just having those conversations with them could be so fantastic. I wouldn't do it in like a group form of like 40 kids, though. That would be horrifying. I would get bullied. I would get barraged with questions and stuff. But I think if I had to wrap my thoughts up in like one tagline, it would be like recreating small spaces for people, because in a small space, honestly, you can talk about a lot of things. You talk about them in the bigger spaces, things can easily get out of hand, I've found, and stuff, controversy. And especially in those younger groups, people can be more passionate, they can be more open, they can be more human, honestly, in those smaller spaces, because we talk about safe spaces and we talk about having a non-judgmental approach. But I feel like that can only really be achieved in those smaller spaces. So,
Yeah.
like, having this conversation, like me and you can have this conversation, we'll be perfectly fine. But like, if I walked into like my local library and I had that conversation, I'd probably be approached at some point. Maybe positively, maybe negatively, I don't know. But that's the culture that I want to move forward to. I was at an extra familial harm workshop, like I think it was last month, and one of the things they brought up is that we should not ever take the approach that children are unreachable, but that services may have been unavailable to them. And I see that a lot with kids, because if I can get that into that small space, I can make them care. I can give them that human approach and give them that human feeling of, I'm going to have a discussion with you. I'm not going to lecture to you. And it makes all the difference, as opposed to kind of going into these massive spaces and trying to lecture a bunch of, young kids, and they may not be mature enough to understand the topic in that big of a space. And like we discussed earlier, some people are they are they are audio learners, they can be written learners, they can be a mixture of both. They can be kind of more of a discussion learner, where you have to explain the concept to them, and then go through their feedback to you, and kind of come to a conclusion. There's a lot of different learners out there, and we can't just approach them from one perspective. We have to approach them from multiple. And so far I've found that kind of like the small spaces are lacking, but also just like alternate means of communication. Are we producing this material for different age groups, or are we just all kind of grouping them all up into just year 7 to year 11, year 12 to year 13, whatever? Are we doing this in different languages? Are we doing this in different styles? Because again, people will be hooked by different things. Sometimes it's the way they introduce yourself. Sometimes it's the colors on your leaflet. Sometimes it's the way that people explain your online space. Like, there's a lot of different ways to engage and be engaged. And for me, I work best, I think, in those debate spaces. But I guess the question then is like, how do we get to that standpoint? Because
Yeah.
a lot of these kids, they're willing to learn, or they're willing to engage, but they don't know how to. And even if they are engaged, it might not be in a way that they actually respond to quite well. And in those smaller spaces, you can accommodate that. You have more flexibility, you have more elasticity in your approach.
Yeah, definitely.
But then that's where the youth centers come in, or like the community centers, which kind of need to be used a lot more because like they're just empty most days of the week. And you know, I'm very happy that you got this new constructed building, but like let's get them used and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
again, like I said, I can understand that it can be awkward to approach these kind of topics, but that's where the spaces come in.
And I think it's a shame because it's not even just absent to just, kids in schools, but specifically kids in care. Like they don't get those spaces. And I think part of like what we do here is making sure that those kids and young people get that chance. Because ultimately what they need is just a support system to know that, whatever I want to do, I can do it. I don't have to push my dreams back, push what I want back just because it seems like it's out of reach right now.
It's always funny when I'm in those spaces because like when I bring up that I do a lot of online work, they're like, oh well, they're like, so how do you stay engaged with the young kids and stuff? And I'm like, I'm not that old. Like I'm youthful, I'm visceral, I am okay, and like they're not used to young people being in a lot of
Yeah.
those spaces because what you see is at least of our generation, you see the famous examples, you see the Greta Thunberg, you see the Malala Yousafzais of our generation, you see those young people who are kind of standing up for what they believe in and being and kind of discussing things on a big level. But then like I go to these events and like they're not like, oh, like you're under 30, huh, interesting, and I'm there like, yes.
Yeah.
And you know it with this weird kind of like chain of like ideally the young people's concerns should be up at these kind of meetings and up at these kind of discussions, but they're not. And I've to figure out where that engagement link is missing
Mhm.
because like when I go to these forums and stuff like that, yes, I understand that I'm dealing with quite mature people, but there are very basic concepts that are being missed here. There are basic ideas that are being missed here. You know, we talk about radical change and stuff like that, and a lot of people I understand like to talk about fixing the wheel or burning down the wheel or replacing the wheel entirely. But then like I'm sat here and I think I don't remember if it was Warda. I think it was Warda, but I think Lauren has also spoken about this a little bit as well. When we hear those kind of things, our thought process is like, but what about the people that we're working with? You want all this radical change, but like how are the young people going to survive that change when all of their services are being retooled and reconfigured and remade? Like being in those kind of debate forums is quite interesting because I understand the bigger picture, but like I work on the ground. I'd say I'm a fairly like feet on my ground type person. I work with the young kids, I work with the trainings and stuff like that. Yes, I don't see. I'm aware of the wider system, but I am not the wider system. Like we talk about education reform a lot, and I think education reform has to be done. But also, like, you really want like, us to go through like how much without any kind of information because you need to retool the system? It's like no. It's like, and that's why I want these young people up in these spaces because all of a sudden they can point out the most obvious things that need to be fixed and the most obvious things that they need without us trying to go to the standpoint of depriving them of materials and resources while we try to kind of improve things. I don't think it's probably the most popular opinion, I guess, but it's the one that I have because I don't think that we can institute any of the things that we discuss. We have to do them alongside what we're already working with. Like I think there are places where we need to run. I think there are places where we need to walk with regards to kind of enacting change and stuff like that. But I'm the perspective of like, well, what am I have like for this time period that you're discussing? We talk about budgets a lot as well. Oh my god, budgets like in these meetings and stuff like that. I'm like, I understand that you have an issue like with your budget, but like, what are they gonna do? Like,
Yeah.
what do they do in the meantime? Like, what do we do in the meantime with them? It's like something, I guess. And it's like, okay, cool. I'm gonna put on like some audio visual videos. I'm gonna take my like 14-year-old group and they're gonna watch Coco Melon while we figure things out. It's like, what can you do?
Unfortunately, there's always going to be people who have to, exist within it, wherein it's like the kids are still going to be there. Like you said, like we can't just get rid of the children. So the children need education, the children need support, they need something around them. And I think it's frustrating because in those meetings, they kind of undermine you in the sense of like, you're young, you don't really understand it. It's like, yeah, but I'm young. I literally was at school like 6 years ago.
I
You were
am here
20
now.
years ago. So
Yeah, and I mean, like from perspective of like both sides of I guess
Mhm.
the business in a sense. We have the aspect of working with kids and stuff, which is like cool and all, and that's like the issue of like funding and stuff like that and all that stuff. And then we have the business side of things where I wouldn't say it's a training taboo, but a lot of people are unwilling to get certain types of training.
Mm.
I love getting training, honestly. I love learning new things. I love enriching myself. I want to do more courses and stuff. And I think a lot of people have been very reluctant to do that, or not even reluctant, just like unavailable to do it. One of the things that we've done is we've done trauma-informed care, right? So building an understanding with professionals that yes, the child can be traumatized, but actually you can also have your own traumas and your own lived experiences that can impact how you work. And that training's honestly been fantastic. We've seen a lot of impact in our beneficiaries with that. But then again, it's like how many people are actually going to receive that training, And I end it because training costs money. I understand it costs times and stuff like that. But there's a lot of training I think that a lot of professionals need to go through as well to build that understanding. Because I understand that I have the bias. I have the what's the traditional bias of being a young person. So I have more experience working with young people because, like I said, I am him. But with a lot of kind of older professionals, a lot of older safeguarding workers in particular, and also older policymakers, there is a brutal necessity for them to undergo certain types of trainings and stuff like that without kind of the taboo of, oh well, you're telling me I need to go through this training, but actually I think I'm doing just fine. It's like, no, it's like, go through the training. What's the worst that's going to happen if you go through training? Honestly,
Just learn
worst
something.
case scenario, you have learned absolutely nothing. Best case scenario, you have learned a lot of things. There is no downside to gaining new information in these spaces and stuff like that. And like I'm eyeing certain types of trainings. I understand that some of them are quite, interesting. We have like the government have like a cyber essentials one that's like £500 per person, and like that one is like I understand some people are looking at that, like, ooh, that's a big price point. But I'm looking at it from the standpoint of like, well, if I learn something, I'm probably going to get more worth out of it with the trainings I can do and stuff. And that's kind of why I've liked working with a lot of different people and stuff like that. It's the training perspectives and such, because like when we did the radicalization training, all of a sudden I will be like, do you recognize number 5? And people will be like, oh, he looks like a pastor. And I'm like, that's David Duke. And they're like, who is David Duke? And then I explain to them who David Duke is. Like the people who were actually doing most of that radicalization training, they know who David Duke is, but they don't know the other stuff about him. And that's where I come into it. And that's where my experience and that's where my training comes into it. That's when you learn new things. And, yes, it's great to kind of go into these meetings and stuff like that, but I have to be equipped with knowledge, and I have to hope that these people are also equipped with either the knowledge that I have, or at least the empathy and the understanding to figure out where I'm coming across from. Because, again, change is not going to happen without discussion. And especially when I'm working with the young people, I have to have empathy and I have to have certain types of experiences and I have to have certain types of training, honestly.